So my friends and anyone who follows my Letterboxd page know that I love Wes Anderson. I'm absolutely in love with this style. There's just something about that playfulness, the whimsicalness of that, and the way that there's just like such a dedication to beauty in every frame of his movies that I'm a huge appreciator of. I actually hadn't seen much of his work until I heard that a new Wes Anderson was coming out earlier this year, which was The Phoenician Scheme, and so I watched a lot more of his movies around that time. Of course, Fantastic Mr. Fox has been a classic that I've loved for a while now, but The Phoenician Scheme was kind of what kickstarted my journey into watching more of his films. So I just rewatched it, and it's kind of like rocketing to the top of my list of Wes Anderson films because it's just it's legitimately one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. Like there's just something about every single comedic beat, every joke that just resonates with me personally. It's such a ridiculously funny movie. Like that type of humor, I guess it is really just like the Wes Anderson type of humor, but it's like specifically in this movie is just so unbelievably funny. I guess it's like there's a ton of dry humor, but there's also just like the humor's in the details. That's what I love. Like for instance, like there's one scene when Bjorn like just pops into the airplane that they're traveling in and he's like the diplomatic pouch has arrived and he's just holding like a big pouch that says diplomatic pouch on it, and for some reason just that kind of thing, like the little details and like the things that are spoken that are so obvious are just so funny to me, and this movie has like the most of that. What's also interesting is like other Wes Anderson movies, they all have their own style of humor, which is like super cool and creative. Like Fantastic Mr. Fox, I feel like is more slapstick in its humor. It still has its regular Wes Anderson type of things, where it like highlights the quirky things that make life funny and also like the pseudo philosophical things that characters say like in really fancy words, which is always funny, and that's just the way that Wes Anderson characters deliver their lines. um like that's the but the humor in Fantastic Mr. Fox is kind of more slapstick, whereas like in Asteroid City it's like super quirky, like awkward pauses, awkward humor I guess is more like Asteroid City. That one's also like really more overtly philosophical. It's similar to Phoenician Scheme in some senses. I'm not sure I can actually put a finger on what the style of humor is in Grand Budapest. That one is just like, I feel like the visual Wes Anderson movie, like it's actually a visual feast. There's just something about the humor in this where they just state the obvious that I just find like endlessly hilarious. Like for instance, Jaja takes a bullet for his friend at one point, and like, he steps in front of him, gets shot, and he goes, and his friend goes, "He took a bullet for me." And then like he goes down to the ground where he's laying down, and Jaja's like, "I took a bullet for you." And then the guy goes, "I'm aware of that. I witnessed the event." It's just like this like dry delivery of things that like should be obvious for some reason is just, it's, I mean, it's in part due to just the way that the actors are giving their lines, and just I don't know, the context that Wes Anderson puts everything in makes things ridiculous and makes things really funny. Like for instance, the basketball scene, that was one of the clips that Focus Features had actually released ahead of the film that I'd already seen before watching it, with Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston, just like the way that that's shot with just like these static comedic shots of these characters just goofily making these impossible sometimes basketball shots, paired with like sound design that's just so crisp and so it just kind of like rings in the air because there's no soundtrack at that point, just makes these moments that much funnier because like they're such normal scenes, but they're framed in a Wes Andersonian way, which makes them just really comedic. Aside from the humor, which is just totally up my alley, it might be like just really quirky, but I mean, lots of people like Wes Anderson, so surely I'm not alone in this regard. Like, there are just so many aspects of it that are absolutely hilarious. Aside from that, it actually, the reason why I liked it so much this time is because, and I did notice it when I watched it in theaters as well, but it's got a depth of philosophy that I don't see in a lot of the other films. I think Asteroid City has this as well, but Asteroid City is also purposely vague in that it doesn't really have much of a real message. Whereas the Phoenician Scheme specifically tackles religion in a way that Wes Anderson has done subtly throughout all of his filmography, but never has done in a way that's so on the nose as this film. And I actually really liked that because it's got a lot to say about the existence of God, grappling with these existential crises and what that means for being a human being. And what it also touches on is just the nature of beauty and the love of beauty itself, which I think is super cool, like coming from Wes Anderson. Like it's another sort of meta thing in my mind because he clearly loves beauty. His films are dedicated almost wholly to just giving you perfect symmetrical visual beauty. There's just one quote that I wrote down actually that I wanted to read. The Mother Superior, like the abbess of the monastery that Liesel, the nun, the novitiate nun's character, used to be a part of, basically gives her this little monologue about beauty, which is basically like, you can totally tell it's just Wes Anderson giving a defense for the reason that he loves beauty. She says, "Worldly adornments do serve certain good people for the good. We're not all destined to deny ourselves man's earthly pleasures. Some thrive in tranquil simplicity, others find beauty in colors and splendor and jubilation. This is no reproach, my child." So like, that idea of people finding beauty in colors and jubilate in like the things that are beautiful about the world, visually speaking, that's literally like Wes Anderson's almost stated purpose in creating films, is just the fact that he unapologetically loves and enjoys the beautiful things that this world has to offer. It's baked into there what his intention with this movie was, is essentially to give a little bit of a defense of the reason why he even makes movies in the first place. And that's something that I actually totally agree with. Like, it really rings true when it comes to art, is that there are people, like in this specific case, literally monastics, who deny the world and all the beautiful things that the world has to offer us, like the pleasures of the world, right? Like, those are people who just throw all of that away for the sake of loving God. But there are also people who inspire and edify and uplift the people around them by creating things that are beautiful, and by just simply enjoying and being appreciators of that beauty. And Wes Anderson is totally one of those people. And I think that kind of like, it hits the nail on the head of the reason why I really, really love his work and his style, is because of that. Because he has an unapologetic joy of the things that are beautiful. And it, again, like I think I said this at the beginning, it kind of just oozes out of every frame of his work. Like in this movie specifically, and this is kind of ties into like the idea of the humor, is that it's so detail oriented that not only is he putting all sorts of just funny little things in the details, like silly and ridiculous things, but he's also putting beauty in all those little details. What I love about these films is they're so grounded in these meticulously, ridiculously detailed sets. Like, the set design is gorgeous because there's all these little things going on, and he's not even expecting you to see all of them, but they're all there, right? Like, for instance, the Criterion Collection copy of the Royal Tenenbaums that I had, it's got a fold-out poster in it with like a super detailed diagram of the entire house of the set that the Tenenbaum family lives in the movie. Like, that he put all this effort and detail into putting all these little props in their specific places and creating a set that immerses you in a world that, like, for a lot of people, like in the modern filmmaking community, it would just be over the top. Like, it would just be too much. Like, you don't need that many props for a clip that you're only going to see for a few seconds in a movie. But Wes Anderson cares so much about that attention to detail, and he knows that that's what really makes his films the beautiful works of art that they are, is that attention to detail. And so I feel like the Phoenician Scheme is probably actually the best example of that I've seen in his filmography. Again, all of his films have meticulous, beautiful production design and an attention to detail that soars above all the other filmmakers, all of his other contemporaries. But since Phoenician Scheme is putting you, it's really like fast paced, and you're going through all these different like missions that he's going on to fulfill his crazy financial scheme that he's trying to do. You're put into like all these different environments and so many different sets and crazy places that the characters can put themselves in, with all sorts of different props and background elements that you can like search out. And that also reminded me of the fact that like all of Wes Anderson's movies like get better and better on rewatch because they're so complicated and they have such a meticulous, detail-oriented eye that you can't really notice everything on the first watch. I think I've seen Fantastic Mr. Fox like 3 times. I mean, it's just one of my favorite movies just in general. Just like the feeling and the vibe of it is so nostalgic to like my childhood, and there's just so much beauty packed into that movie. So that's the reason why I watch it over and over again. It's also a perfect fall movie to watch with siblings or friends, alongside Over the Garden Wall, of course. But it's also like, yeah, all these details, like you just keep watching it and you notice all these like new comedic things, as well as new, like, just legitimately visually or conceptually beautiful things that go on in those movies. And so yeah, the Phoenician Scheme, I feel like, is almost like the crux of that vibe that Wes Anderson has of creating meticulously beautiful films that have a visual flair that just, like, is incomparable to other movies. Now, the other thing that was super cool about this movie, like I mentioned before, is just the religious themes that go throughout it. Because Wes Anderson, you go through his filmography and you notice that he goes through a lot of these existential, philosophical crises through a lot of his characters. Like, his characters are kind of just the surrogate for the things that he's going through as an artist and as a human being. The Phoenician Scheme tackles religion really head on. Asteroid City, which came before it, talked about those things. There's characters that believed in God at the beginning of the movie that don't believe in God anymore, and vice versa. And the Phoenician Scheme has the same exact trope that goes throughout the movie, where you have this character of Jaja who he almost dies a lot, and he can, for some reason, he never ends up dying. Like, he goes into all these super life-threatening situations, and every time he almost dies, he has a super cool, surrealist, black and white vision of him in heaven, or in some sort of afterlife place where he's on trial. And two things there. One, just in the visual style, I love that surrealism. Like, it's done in typical, precise Wes Anderson fashion. It's not like crazy, messy kind of surrealism like you might see from the likes of David Lynch, but it is still like that same vibe of just cool, crazy imagery that you're not supposed to really make sense of. And I mean, it's in black and white and it's a different aspect ratio, so of course I'm gonna love that. Seeing that in theaters was cool too. I remember my little brother being like, I've never seen a movie in this kind of aspect ratio, because we were immediately surprised by the fact that, like, it's a 4:3, right, which is your typical, like, art house aspect ratio the entire movie. But then these black and white, like, afterlife sequences are like a smaller square, and then there are even moments where they'd have like postage stamp size, like, aspect ratio for some of the transitions between scenes. And so, again, just a cool Wes Anderson thing. I just kicked my tripod. But yeah, it's just a cool Wes Anderson thing, how he's always being creative with the things that most filmmakers view as rules. Like, there are just certain things that you do in movies. There are certain just limits to how your movie is supposed to be shown, and he's constantly breaking those boundaries, which, again, is another thing that is part of his appeal as a filmmaker. But anyway, these black and white surrealist sequences of him in this, afterlife, or I guess, like, bridge period between life and death, where they're deciding if he's going to stay dead, something along those lines. He has all sorts of really interesting encounters with these people in the afterlife, some of which are like his dead wife, and I don't know who the other characters are. There's just characters that are essentially lodging accusations against him and choosing whether or not he should die or live, which is interesting because, and there's tons of biblical parallels here. I mean, again, it is a religious thing. That's kind of the point of these near-death experiences. But yeah, there's all these interesting biblical parallels with how this sort of thing would work. It reminds me of the story in the Bible, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, where the rich man, he goes into similar, afterlife kind of area, and he is burning in hell, and he's like yelling across the gap to Abraham and asking, like, at least, can I go back down, or can you send someone to back down to, like, tell my brothers that this is what's in store, right? It's that kind of idea of deciding, like, all right, is he going to stay dead, or is he going to go back down and continue to live? And every time he ends up getting to go back to Earth and continuing to live. And these near-death experiences kind of start to shake his atheism, and by the end of the movie, he actually does believe in God, and he's had this sort of religious awakening, which is really interesting because you see the opposite parallel with his daughter, who's a nun, or a novitiate nun. She wants to take her vows, but by the end of the movie, she says something along the line, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, something along the lines of, I pray, but no one ever answers. I always just do the thing that I think God would do in response to my prayers. Basically, that she gives up this facade of being this super pious nun, and she's always praying about things, but she never actually gets an answer to her prayers, and so she doesn't really truly believe in God. And so that is just a really clear, it's not like it's a super veiled or shadowed analogy, but it's a very clear look at what Wes Anderson as an artist is going through, at least in the philosophy of this film, where you have certain people who gain faith by their experiences in this life and whatever supernatural experiences they have, and then you have other people who end up not actually believing in God just because they never get the answer that they're looking for. Now, there's this really interesting scene that would probably be controversial in like Christian circles, where Bill Murray is like portraying God, as far as we can tell. He's just like a big old man sitting on a throne, and Zsa Zsa's in front of him, and the vibe of the scene that you get is kind of that Zsa Zsa's wondering why he keeps surviving. And then Bill Murray's portrayal of God mentions Jesus. He says something along the lines of like, my son was killed, and sacrificed by people on earth. And Zsa Zsa goes like, I know, yeah, it's Jesus. And then he snaps back to reality. And that was just an interesting scene both times that I saw it, where essentially I feel like what I'm getting out of that is that it's that sacrifice, that concept of Jesus Christ coming to save the world, that God keeps going back on and deciding to let Zsa Zsa live. And what he ends up deciding to do is sacrifice himself for this Phoenician scheme that he wants to do for the good of humanity. And so it's just interesting to see, not in a super like vague, I'm not like unpacking some like crazy, lore here. It seems pretty obvious, especially on the second viewing, that we just have these themes of like Zsa Zsa being someone who only lives for himself. He neglects his family. He doesn't care about anyone else. He keeps having these near-death experiences, and he keeps surviving, and he's wondering why he doesn't die. And by the end, it's God himself, at least this portrayal of God himself, who tells him that sacrifice is the ultimate love. Essentially, that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting off of this. And he ends up sacrificing himself, and he lives in sort of destitution, and not quite poverty, but just as a nobody, right? Like, he was this big, rich, influential person. He deletes himself from the picture because he believes in this Phoenician scheme, and he ends up, living a life of being a nobody, but he's totally content with that because he's sort of found fulfillment in that sacrifice and in family and all that stuff, right? I mean, because he's got a great relationship with his daughter now, and it sort of ends in this very like wholesome, nice, happy sort of bow tied on the package, nice ending. Zsa Zsa's character, like that cool arc that we get with his character, I thought was really cool because Wes Anderson is often criticized, especially in movies like Asteroid City, for not having much depth in his characters. Now, when you have a massive ensemble cast of tons and tons of A-list actors, all of those people who love to work with Wes Anderson and are in all of his movies, it's easy to get lost in all of those crazy characters and to not really care about the main ones. This movie, I feel like, is a good opposition to that because it focuses really deeply on the father-daughter relationship between Zsa Zsa and Liesel, and it's really his arc that matters, right? These characters come and go like they do in these kinds of movies. It's an ensemble cast. They each have their little moments, but it's always in relation to him and in relation to him and his daughter. And so you have these like main characters that really kind of rise to the top, and it's really only their arc that matters. So I thought that was cool because it's like, yeah, sometimes Wes Anderson can get lost in all the crazy characters he has, but in this movie, it really was about the character development of the main character, and I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, I could glaze Wes Anderson's work forever and ever. I'm an unapologetic lover of everything he makes. But this one, like, just watching it again, I'm just like, the whole time, I'm just like, this is such a good movie. Like, this is just so funny. Everything's so precise. Like, there's always, like, whenever I'm talking about something that I really, really love, like Wes Anderson especially, I always, like, feel like I'm at a loss for words to describe all the things that I love about it, but I think you guys understand. Like, you've probably seen or heard of Wes Anderson. If you haven't, go watch some of his stuff, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Just this, like, geometric love of, like, symmetry and colors and just all this stuff that is so lacking from modern cinema. And that's the thing, is that all of the things in Wes Anderson's style, they all kind of culminate in the fact that his movies feel classic. Like, they feel old. Even though, like, old-fashioned movies weren't this level, like, this ridiculous level of symmetry and craziness that he adds into it. But it just gives off that vibe, right? And, I mean, you can see the things that he's influenced by in a lot of older movies. Like, I remember watching 12 Angry Men earlier this year and being like, oh, wow, this framing, the way that this is blocked all inside one room is totally like something Wes Anderson would do, right? And he said that he's taken inspiration from a lot of these older movies as well. But yeah, it's just cool to see a movie that has beautiful, amazing color theory. This shot composition is so precise, and it's just like a callback to the earlier eras of cinema. And I mean, I'm always going to love a movie that calls back to an earlier era. I'm a nostalgic person. I don't like modernity. I want the past. I want to live in the past. And I want to live in a Wes Anderson movie. Absolutely 100%. This gorgeous universe of Wes Anderson films. Just put me in there, please. Okay, that's pretty much all I have to say about this. It's just an amazingly funny movie. I mean, I guess it's not perfect. It's not Wes Anderson's best, but it's like, I don't know, the more I think about it, the more I watch it, the more I love it. I think it's got some really cool, deep philosophical themes going on, paired with Wes Anderson's style, which I love. So I'm going to just give it a 4 out of 5, 8 out of 10. I mean, like, it's amazing. There's not much that could be improved on here. It's just that, like, it's not his best work, and maybe it's lacking some, like, emotional connection that you could find in other movies. So, yeah. I really don't have much that's negative to say about it. I think it's amazing. But yeah, that's pretty much it.